Hey, what's happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and I've already ranked all of the existing Metroid games. I've also already ranked my personal top 10 favorite Mario games of all time. And today, I'm going to take on the monumental task of ranking my top 10 favorite games in the Legend of Zelda series, a list that everyone is bound to love and no one will disagree with. So clearly that is not true, because there is no way that this video won't be seen as controversial to many people, because there's no way anyone could go through the pain and torment of ranking the Zelda games and then sharing that with the internet and not getting a bunch of flack. It's just not going to happen. So obviously, as you go through this list, just remind yourself that this is not an official list. I'm not trying to tell you that this should be what your list is or your order. Obviously, I'm just making my own personal order. My list will be different from your list, will be different from the next person's list, and the next person, and so on and so on. This kind of disclaimer on this kind of video just is a necessary kind of thing to have to do, right? Because we know how people can react here. So, I get it. You're not going to like my list. You're going to think my number 1 is the worst choice. You're going to think that my number 5 should have been number 1. You're going to think number 7 shouldn't have even been on the list. I mean, whatever. Like, that's just how lists go. But at the end of the day, we obviously all love The Legend of Zelda, and that's what I'm just trying to do and to share with you guys. I did even rank the top 6 Zelda games, I think, to my opinion, many years ago. I don't know why I made it 6 and not 5 or 10. And it was also before Breath of the Wild had even come out, or like the Link's Awakening remake, stuff like that, you know. So it's pretty outdated at this point anyway, and I think I even removed it from the channel because I didn't really like how it turned out. But this is going to be, like, the real deal. This is the new definitive, like, top 10 list, according to my opinion. This is just for fun. I hope that you guys enjoy. Feel free to tell me how much you disagree in the comments below. And with that being said, let's just jump into it. So here we go. We're jumping into the fire, and we're going to start with my personal number 10, my 10th favorite Zelda game of all time. And that is going to be A Link Between Worlds on the Nintendo 3DS. And this 10th spot was very hard for me to choose because I probably had about 3 different Zelda games that I wanted to include here. But at the end of the day, I decided on this because this is this really unique direct sequel to the classic Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, and they even rebuilt basically the exact same map, at least very close to the exact same map from A Link to the Past. And they updated the visuals, and they added all sorts of new things, new dungeons, new tasks, a rental system for the items, which was very unique, and the fact that it was so not linear due to that was really crazy. And then, of course, you had the fact that you had the wall mechanic, where Link could turn himself into a drawing on a wall, and he could move around the world that way and squeeze between corners and cracks and stuff. It was really great. It was a lot of fun. The story was interesting, and the fact that it's one of the few Zelda games that's a direct sequel to another one made it really fascinating. I enjoyed this game. I loved the 3D effect on the 3DS, and so for me, it comes in at number 10. At number 9 will be no doubt one of the bigger controversial choices on this list, but I'm sticking to it because I love this game. And it's The Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link on the NES. And as I've said before, this is the game that's kind of the black sheep title in the Zelda series because it's one of the weirder and more unique ones. It's the only one that kind of features like this top-down world map view that goes in and out of side-scrolling Zelda, which it's also, by the way, the only side-scrolling Zelda game. So it goes between like a side-scrolling and then like a top-down view, and not top-down the way like the original or Link to the Past and stuff do. It's a different kind of world map view. It's not so much top-down action. It is world map view using even like RPG mechanics with like engaging in battles based on enemy icons you see on the screen. And of course, the fact that it actually uses experience points and upgrading your abilities via XP, which is just so weird for Zelda. This is the only game that does that. It's just strange. But an obvious defense that many people have said, and I've also said for years, is the fact that at the time this game came out, it was only the second game. There were no standards or expectations for what The Legend of Zelda was at that time. The Legend of Zelda wasn't a, no pun intended, legendary franchise. It was just a really great kick-ass hit game that came out on the brand new NES in the mid-80s, and then they happened to just make a part 2, and so they could have gone any different direction, and this was just the one that they chose at that time. And even if we separate ourselves from that, I'm just going to tell you, I love what the game is. I love the side-scrolling. I love the top-down stuff. I love the dungeons. I think the towns are great. The music is amazing. Everything about this game is awesome. The only thing that isn't is that it is way too hard. I mean, it is legendary for its difficulty, if anything, and I do think it is unfortunately too hard. That being said, it's still a great game, so for me it comes in at number 9. And at number 8, we have The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the GameCube and the Wii respectively. And, you know, this game is a lot of fun. This game is a massive adventure. It's got one of the more unique stories. I loved the vision of Hyrule. I loved all of the items, and I loved the temples and the dungeons in this game. I think that this was one of the last great eras for awesome dungeons in the Zelda franchise. And some people take issue with like the wolf mechanic and the Twilight Realm and all that stuff. And I get it. Weirdly, I also don't really love that stuff, but I think everything else around this game is so fantastic and it came together so well that I don't really mind. And at least they tried something different with the Wolf Link thing, not to mention, without question, the greatest companion Link has ever had in Midna that had so much character and personality. And she also had her own motivations and goals and desires and wishes, and she became integral to the plot and the final battle of the game with Ganon, which, by the way, is one of the better final battles, I think. I mean, I just love this game. I also love how all the different areas of Hyrule feel so different. I really like that they included this weird, like, snowy cabin kind of dungeon as one of the dungeons in the game, and the story with like the Sasquatch couple that lived there, and it was just this weird, like, neat side story that was also integral to your quest. I thought they did a lot of cool things here. I loved the motion control introduction with the Wii version, which of course is what I played when the Wii launched. It's one of the best launch titles for a console of all time. And, you know, I know some people don't love it, but I really do love it. I think Zant was a great villain as well, by the way. So for me, it comes in at number 8. And at number 7 is a game that I think most people are going to yell at me for not including higher on this list. But I feel pretty good about where I placed it here. And that is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64. This is the other unique situation where a game is a direct sequel to a prior game, that of course being the Ocarina of Time, and this does take place in a different area, Termina, but it is the young Link version from Ocarina of Time, and the very next part and the next steps of his journey he takes after the end of Ocarina of Time. Now, obviously, this game's big evolution and big contribution to the series, and to all of gaming, mind you, was the introduction of the 3-day mechanic and the way the flow of time was utilized in this game, and it was fascinating and mind-blowing. When this game came out, I want to say in the year 2000 or 2001, I think this game came out. I was 20 or 21 years old, loved my Nintendo 64, Ocarina of Time blew my mind, and to have this game come out and do what it did and be so different with, like, a town that had this awesome looking moon of doom, like, hovering above it, and knowing you have 3 days to fix everything and you could keep resetting time, and then knowing you started to learn, like, the weather was the same at the same time every day. People had routines and schedules that they were sticking to. It was so freaking cool, you guys. I thought it was the most amazing thing I had ever experienced. The world is smaller. There's only 4 main areas and 4 main temples before you kind of get to the end situation. And so that part wasn't my favorite, but I still loved the story, the world to explore. I liked the dungeons themselves, not to mention the mask mechanic and changing into different forms of races throughout the world of Termina and Hyrule. It was so freaking cool, so revolutionary when it came out on the Nintendo 64. A beautiful game utilizing that expansion pack. I don't know, man. I think Majora's Mask is great. It's very dark. It's one of the darker games in the franchise, but personally, I think it's borderline a masterpiece. So for me, it comes in at number 7. And at number 6, we have the one and the only The Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo Entertainment System from 1985. So I am somebody who is constantly proud to say that I was a child of the 80s and I was a gamer in the 80s. You know, I was born in 1980. So when The Legend of Zelda came out, at least in the States, I think in 1985, 85 or 86, When it came out, I would have been 5 or 6 years old. And so I was the perfect age to see what that game did, going from the Atari 2600 we had to all of a sudden this amazing new Nintendo and these great graphics and great games. Here comes The Legend of Zelda, which the commercials also billed as a never-ending adventure, which just blew my 5-year-old brain in ways I cannot describe.
Zelda! 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 The Legend of Zelda. A never-ending adventure new for your Nintendo Entertainment System. Zelda!
I was so enthralled with what Zelda was. And you know, I'm definitely a product of my nostalgia, and I'm very much stuck on my nostalgia. That's how I operate. And that nostalgia is helping me have so much love for the original Legend of Zelda all these years later. It really was that good. And if you're somebody who's too young to have experienced it back in its day, it might be hard to explain or hard for you to understand. But I'm not focused on that. I'm just focused on my own experience and what I know of that game when it came out. And it was amazing. We have so much of gaming success that we experience today. We owe so much of it to the original Zelda and that era of Nintendo. It was that groundbreaking. It is that important. So, I love it. It's old. It's outdated. I get it, but I don't care. For me, it comes in at number 6. And we're breaking into the top 5, which means the real controversy is about to start. So here we go with number 5. And it is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on the Nintendo Wii. You guys, I adore this game. I will rave about it to the heavens for the rest of eternity. I know plenty of people don't like it, and that's fine. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not here to try to tell you to like games that you don't like or vice versa. I'm just telling you, I think Skyward Sword is a legit masterpiece. It is, without question, the best execution on story and narrative they've ever had in a Zelda game. I also loved the world. I loved the concept of the sky above and Hyrule below. I thought Skyloft was a great area to explore. I do wish that there was more to the sky. It's a common complaint, and I agree with that. They didn't really flesh out the sky. But there's still some things to do, and I thought it looked and felt great to control and to play, and just the concept alone blew my mind. Then you have the gameplay, which I know people have very mixed opinions on. I personally liked it. I thought it worked. I found it fun. It wasn't perfect, but it was still a blast. And I love what Nintendo was trying to do with it. I thought it was very cool. And while there are problems with the Fi character and with all of the battles with the Imprisoned, I still overall think that the rest of the game, the adventure, the story, the characters, this version of Zelda, which in my opinion is the best version of Zelda from any game, you know, the character of Zelda. And then, of course, you also have 2 amazing final boss battles with Girahim and Demise, and the whole thing just comes together beautifully. I think this game is just an absolute masterpiece. And I will go on record saying this right here and now. Skyward Sword has the best music in any Zelda game ever. I will fight you in the streets over it. It has the best music. So, I obviously love this game. I don't care that there are haters out there. For me, it comes in at number 5. At number 4 might be another controversial choice, because I think many of you will want it higher than number 4. But here it sits, and that is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. And what more needs to be said about Link to the Past? I mean, we've all talked about it forever. We know how good A Link to the Past is. And it's one of those games that is really just as good as people say, right? It was the 3rd Zelda game at the time, and it employed this really cool light world, dark world mechanic. We finally got to see The Legend of Zelda in 16-bit. They went back to the top-down formula from the original Zelda on the NES, so they kind of skipped over everything that happened in the Adventures of Link, and they never went back to that formula of gameplay ever again. And it's an amazing game. It was beautiful. The music was crazy. We were all so excited to have Super Nintendos and to be playing 16-bit games as kids in the 80s and 90s that just having this game be what it was exciting enough. But then you add on to it that it's just an amazing adventure with great dungeons, great puzzle solving, a great huge world to explore. It felt new and open and fresh and real, like we didn't get to experience in the first 2 games because of how gaming technology was evolving alongside of the Zelda franchise. And this game was a great showcase for what that was. So I know many people consider it to be the best Zelda game of all time, or maybe even the best video game of all time. And I'm never going to fight that battle with you, because I think this game is worthy at being at the top of those lists. Obviously, it's not that way for me, so I still absolutely love this game, and I hold it up as a triumph in video game development. So, it comes in for me at number 4. And obviously, now that we're breaking into the top 3, process of elimination means you probably know which 3 games these are going to be. There are no crazy surprises here. The 3 games you're thinking about are the 3 we're about to hear. So, spoiler alert, right? But you want to know the order. What's the order that I put these games in? Well, I'll tell you. At number 3, for me, is The Legend of Zelda, The Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64. This game, man, just like Link to the Past, what more can you even say about the Ocarina of Time after so long? It's been, what, 22 years, I think, now, in 2020? And this game is one of the seminal moments in all of gaming. For the longest time after this game came out, many of us, I'll say, were holding this game up as the greatest video game ever made. There was a time in my life where I absolutely thought this was the greatest video game ever made. And at the time, honestly, it would probably even be true. I don't even think it's a crazy statement to think that in 1998, 1999, coming off of that game, that maybe it was the greatest video game ever made. The only other game putting up a real fight against it at that time was Final Fantasy VII. But in general, most people thought Ocarina was great. And it was the story. It was Zelda in 3D. It was the introduction of Z-targeting and that whole crazy way to fight in third person when 3D gaming was brand new. And that's become a standard in just a lot of gaming nowadays. I mean, the idea of holding down a button to stay targeted to your foe, I mean, plenty of games use it that aren't even Zelda or Nintendo games. That was a game changer for the entire industry. And when you think about the fact that the first Zelda game in 3D in the late 90s, when the whole concept and technology was so fresh and brand new, it was in its infancy to be able to have games like this. They were willing to basically take what felt like 2 different games and put them into one. The fact that the amazing story already included this crazy time travel thing, and then they had the guts to make that time travel create a young version of Link game and then an old version of Link game with completely different stories and completely different versions of Hyrule and different dungeons, different weapons, and different outfits you're wearing as Link. It is mind-blowing. It's like obscene that Nintendo was able to do this their first time out, you guys. And it worked. It's not like it crumbled under the pressure and it buckled under itself. It absolutely worked. This game, I think even still today, might be the best reviewed game of all time, like across the board, with all things being equal. That's saying something. This game is an unbelievable triumph, and I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, it's great. So, coming in at number 3, it might not be first or second, but it still means something to come in that high. So I'm very proud to say the Ocarina of Time is my 3rd favorite Zelda game of all time. And at number 2, we have The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. And I know many people were probably expecting this to be number 1, and a lot of people would put it at number 1. And just like with A Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, I get it. I support that. I support anyone who wants to put Breath of the Wild as their number 1 game. And I'll tell you what, it came really close. This game is a game that gave me a feeling like I hadn't felt in probably 10, 15, or 20 years at the time that I played it. I felt so lost and excited and jovial as I played this game for the first time. It literally felt like being a kid playing new games for the first time. And that's saying something, man, because we all go through the motions of playing new games that come out nowadays on all of our favorite consoles or our PCs, and we love them and we have fun with them. We consider some of them to be masterpieces and 10s out of 10s. And that's one thing. But it's another thing to feel it in a different way. And Breath of the Wild, even more than my number 1 choice on this list, made me feel something when I played that game that is really hard to describe. Other than what I've already said, it made me feel like being a kid again. In a good way, okay? Not in a bad, cheesy, or dumb way. In the best way possible, it made me feel like the kid version of myself playing games and just being so blown away by what I was seeing. And to achieve something like that in the year 2017 when this game came out, and with a gaming industry that is so much bigger than it was 20 years ago, the internet has changed the way we look at it, the way we play it, the way we play with people, the way we talk to each other, and to be able to recreate that feeling in this age is an incredible achievement, you guys. And let's be real, the game's also fun. It's the greatest open world I've ever personally experienced. The story, while not amazing, was interesting enough, and I actually love that they didn't force the story down your throat, because you just get to live in what feels like a living, breathing world. This version of Hyrule. The gameplay is fantastic. The combat is amazing. All of the shrines are great. There's so many different weapons, so many different outfits, so much customization, and you can just go. You just get to just live and experience this world, and it's satisfying on just that one merit. It doesn't even need to be a game with an adventure and a story. Just the world itself is so fun. And so I could continue to gush about this game, but we all know how great it is. I love this game. It is a 10 out of 10, one of the greatest video games ever created in the history of the industry. So it sits here at number 2. And so that means you probably know what my number 1 all-time favorite Zelda game is. Either you've already heard me say it, or you can now just tell because of process of elimination. And of course, that game is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, released on the GameCube. Now, this is definitely a situation where my personal bias is coming in to affect my opinion, but it's a subjective list, so this whole list is basically built that way. And The Wind Waker, you guys, you know, I talked about how the Breath of the Wild gave me a feeling like I hadn't felt in a while. And that is true. And that feeling was definitely stronger than the feeling that The Wind Waker gave me. However, The Wind Waker still did give me a huge burst of that feeling, okay? This game came out in the early 2000s on the GameCube. So much controversy, so much divisiveness. Coming after the 2000s Space World demo that showed a very cool, modern-looking version of Link and Ganon fighting with all new 3D graphics we'd never seen before, that was what most of us expected. The Wind Waker was not that at all. And I will even tell you, when I first saw The Wind Waker in a video game magazine walking through a Blockbuster, and I flipped through it and saw the pages of the reveal of the first new Zelda game, and I saw this cartoony Link in this cartoony world, I was crushed. That is the irony of The Wind Waker, you guys. I was horrified. I was like, what is this? And I didn't know what to do with myself. I would have been 20 or 21 years old or so probably when I saw this magazine. You know, I wasn't a kid. I wasn't even a teenager. And I was like, what is this nonsense? This isn't Zelda. This isn't that cool, you know, Ganon and Link fight that I saw from that other thing a couple of years ago. What happened to Zelda? What happened to Link? Nintendo, you're ruining it. These were the thoughts I had in my head and the conversations I had with my friends at that time. I thought it was going to be terrible. But a couple of years later, when the game was getting ready to come out, I actually found myself in a leadership position at a GameStop. And through that, my manager at the time brought home a demo disc of The Wind Waker she got from the GameStop manager conferences back in the day. And she put it into our GameCube unit in our store so that us, the employees, could play it. She was like, you guys gotta check it out. You know, we all thought the new Zelda Wind Waker game was going to be really weird, but I played it, we all saw it, and it's amazing. And we all played it, and it was literally just like fireworks going off in our brains. I was in love. I was blown away what it was like to really see this living, breathing cartoon that I could control. And it's just the graphics that we're talking about here, but that really was the hook to the game. At that time, it wasn't weird for graphics to be the hook to a game, and it blew my mind. And then, of course, the game comes out, and I have this amazing memory of finally setting sail for the first time in the King of Red Lions, and I've got my telescope, and for the first time, I'm just at sea on my own. And my adventure has really begun. I've got all the introduction stuff out of the way, and now I'm just Link by myself, taking off to do my thing. And I'm like, okay, let's play around with this, you know, being in the sea kind of mechanic that this game is all about. What's this like? I sail a little bit. I'm looking around. I can see silhouettes of islands way off in the distance of this beautiful world and this bright blue sea. And I pull out my telescope and I use it to zoom in from way back in one of the little islands. And what I actually see is a tiny little raft with one of the little goblin enemies. And forgive me, I don't know the name of this exact enemy. And he's sitting on a raft, and I can see the silhouette of him moving around on this raft from like so far away. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just an enemy way out there, and I could just sail right up to him, and I could be there, and we could fight and interact on the sea, and just forget about it, you guys. That kind of stuff. What I'm getting at here is, as I started to realize what this game was offering at that time, and the amazing mechanics, and the huge great world, and the big open sea, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then, we know that they cut some dungeons out of the game, and that is unfortunate. But the dungeons that are there, while not challenging, are incredibly fun to go through. Loved it, loved the story, loved the Tetris Zelda thing, loved the King of Red Lions. Absolutely just floored by the final battle with Ganon. I mean, come on, we all were floored by that. The revolution of Hyrule and the Great Sea, it's amazing. And so, the 21-year-old version of myself who played this game, loved this game. I still love this game as the 39-year-old version of myself today. It's amazing. It is absolutely, without question, my favorite Zelda game of all time. It's one of my favorite video games ever made. I think it's a 10 out of 10, and so it makes it here at number 1. So that was really hard to do, but that's my list, man. It all comes down to the Wind Waker for me. The game is perfect. I love the game, and when I say it's perfect for me. It's not a perfect video game, but it is perfect for me. I love the Wind Waker, you guys. I love the visuals, I love the world, I love the Great Sea, I love the sailing, I love the dungeons, I love the story. It's just an amazing game. But I love all of these games. That's the point of this list. Zelda is one of the greatest franchises in video game history. It's had such a huge impact on gaming and on pop culture and on all of us. I consider myself very lucky to have been old enough to experience it from its very first game all the way up until today. I know that I'm lucky to be old enough to have done so. And, yeah, I just love The Legend of Zelda, guys. So this is how I rank it. Plenty of other games came close to being on this list, but these are my 10 favorite games. What do you think about my list? How terrible do you think it is? And then, of course, please share your own favorite Zelda games. Share your own lists. I want to hear about it. I want to see it in the comments. I want to know what you guys think. And so with that, we're going to call this video a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.